Welcome to my channel of Gill Master Stories. Don't forget to subscribe button and press on the bell icon for more inspiration and mind-blowing stories. Marked for his appearance at a luxury car dealership, Harold Jenkins walked out humiliated, only to return the next day as their new boss. What happens next will leave you questioning everything about respect and assumptions. It was a bright Monday morning in Birmingham, Alabama. Harold Jenkins adjusted the brim of his worn fedora and straightened his cardigan before stepping out of his modest sedan. The upscale car dealership loomed ahead, its glass doors gleaming under the sunlight. He had been eyeing a specific luxury car for months, a symbol of quiet triumph after years of discipline and hard work. Today he finally had the means to make it his. As Harold entered, the air-conditioned showroom felt cold, not because of the temperature, but the atmosphere. Conversations among the sales staff trailed off. As eyes swept over him, his cardigan had a small fray near the sleeve, and his trousers, though clean, bore the unmistakable wrinkles of age. The showroom buzzed back to life, punctuated by muted chuckles and whispers that Harold could sense were directed at him. "Good morning," he greeted the nearest salesperson, a sharply dressed man whose name tag read Kevin. Kevin barely concealed his smirk as he replied, "Morning, sir. How can we help you today?" Harold's voice was steady, but his eyes gleamed with determination. "I'd like to take a closer look at the 2020 Ford Genesis G90. He pointed toward the sleek, black sedan, displayed prominently under the showroom lights. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "That's quite the car," he said, his tone laced with doubt. "Are you sure you're looking for something like that?" Harold didn't flinch. "I'm sure." Another salesman joined Kevin, nudging him with a grin. "Maybe he's just window shopping. Happens all the time." The comment stung, but Harold didn't show it. Instead, he stood taller, maintaining his calm demeanor. The chuckles grew louder when Harold asked about the price. "That one starts at $90,000, Kevin said, dragging out the numbers. As though speaking to someone who couldn't understand, Harold nodded, taking mental notes. As he ran his hand along the smooth surface of the car, another voice behind him muttered, "Maybe next time, sir." The laughter echoed in Harold's ears as he exited the dealership. He paused outside, glancing back at the building. There was no anger in his gaze, only a quiet determination. He adjusted his fedora, climbed back into his car, and drove away, ready to make a decision that would soon change everything. But Harold didn't leave that laughter behind. It would drive him forward, straight to a choice they'd never see coming. Harold Jenkins wasn't just a 65-year-old man in a cardigan. His story was one of quiet endurance and relentless determination. Born and raised in Selma, Alabama, he had grown up during some of the most turbulent years of the civil rights movement. His parents, both factory workers, instilled in him the value of hard work and dignity, even in the face of prejudice. For over 3 decades, Harold dedicated his life to education, working as a history teacher in public schools. He wasn't the kind of teacher who just covered dates and battles. He made history come alive, weaving in lessons of resilience and respect. His students adored him, but teaching in underfunded schools meant he never made much money. Still, Harold was a man of foresight. While others splurged on fleeting comforts, he quietly invested small portions of his paycheck into stocks, bonds, and real estate. Over the years, what started as modest savings gradually grew into a solid portfolio. After retiring, Harold found joy in volunteering at local libraries and mentoring young men in his community. But he had always harbored a dream, a seemingly unattainable goal. He wanted to own something that symbolized success on his own terms, a tangible reward for years of discipline. That dream came into focus when he saw the luxury sedan in a car magazine months earlier. He didn't need the car to prove anything to anyone. It wasn't about vanity for Harold. It represented a milestone, a way to honor his life's journey. He had spent decades defying stereotypes, carving his path in a world that often underestimated him. But he was also no stranger to the sting of judgment. And the scene at the dealership that morning was a reminder of how easily people dismissed someone who didn't fit their narrow expectations. Harold didn't dwell on the humiliation. Instead, he saw an opportunity, a chance to make a statement that went far beyond just buying a car. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. As he flipped through his financial records, the dealership wasn't just selling cars, it was part of a small, regional chain whose owner was looking to retire. Harold had seen the listing months ago, but dismissed it at the time. Now it seemed almost like fate. With quiet resolve, Harold picked up the phone and called his financial advisor. The wheels of change had started turning. But Harold wasn't just buying a car, or even a dealership. He was buying the chance to rewrite how they saw him, and how others like him would be seen in the future. The next morning, the dealership hummed with its usual activity. Salesmen gathered near the coffee machine, laughing and swapping stories about the eccentric customers they'd encountered. Over the years, Kevin, the salesman who had spoken to Harold, relished retelling his version of yesterday's encounter. "I mean, did you see the guy? He was ready to take out a loan just to sit in that car," Kevin said, chuckling as he stirred sugar into his coffee. "I almost felt bad for him, almost." Another salesman chimed in, "You're nicer than me. I would have just told him to check the used car lot down the road." Their laughter was loud and unrestrained. As though mocking Harold was a sport, none of them thought twice about it. To them, Harold was just another customer who didn't belong in their pristine showroom, a man who looked out of place in a world of polished shoes and tailored suits. Meanwhile, Harold was finalizing paperwork with his attorney. The dealership's owner, a man in his early 70s, had been eager to sell. The deal closed faster than Harold had anticipated. By lunchtime, he was officially the new owner of the same dealership where he had been ridiculed less than 24 hours ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He thought about Kevin and the others, laughing at his expense. Harold wasn't one to hold grudges, but this time, he felt the need to address the disrespect. It wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson they wouldn't forget. That afternoon, Harold returned to the dealership. This time, he didn't enter through the main doors. Instead, he stepped into the manager's office. The general manager, a well-dressed man named Brian, greeted Harold with the same air of superiority that Kevin had shown the day before. "Mr. Jenkins, was it?" Brian asked, not bothering to mask the condescension in his tone. "Are you here for another look at the G90? Harold smiled, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Not exactly. I believe you'll want to gather the staff for a meeting. I have some news to share." Brian frowned, clearly confused, but obliging. Within minutes, the sales team was assembled in the showroom, their laughter replaced with hushed whispers as they saw Harold standing at the front. Kevin leaned over to another salesman and muttered, "What's he doing here?" Harold waited until the room was silent. He looked at each face, pausing briefly on Kevin, whose smirk had disappeared. Then he spoke. "Good afternoon. My name is Harold Jenkins. As of today, I'm the new owner of this dealership." The shock was instantaneous. Gasps rippled through the room, and Kevin's face turned a deep shade of red. Harold stood firm, letting the weight of his words sink in. For a moment you could hear a pin drop. But Harold wasn't finished. He had more to say. Words that would make them rethink every assumption they'd ever made. The silence was deafening. Harold let it linger, watching the stunned expressions on the sales team's faces. Brian, the general manager, was the first to break it. He stammered, "Wait, what? You bought the dealership?" "That's correct," Harold replied calmly, his voice steady but firm. "I finalized the deal this morning. I'm not here to gloat or embarrass anyone, but we need to have a conversation about how we treat people who walk through those doors." Kevin shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as though looking for an escape. The rest of the team avoided Harold's gaze, their earlier confidence now replaced with unease. Harold stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "Yesterday, I came in here as a potential customer, someone genuinely interested in purchasing a vehicle. What I encountered wasn't professionalism. or respected was mockery. Assumptions were made about me, not based on what I said or did, but how I looked. The room remained silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. Harold's tone softened, but his resolve remained evident. I've lived a long life, I've seen a lot, and let me tell you, this kind of behavior doesn't just harm your business. It reflects poorly on who you are as individuals. Brian tried to interject, his voice flustered. Mr. Jenkins, I assure you this isn't how we typically operate. Yesterday was an anomaly. Harold raised a hand to stop him. I'm not here to argue or hear excuses. What I want is change, effective immediately. This dealership will have new standards. Standards that reflect integrity, respect, and professionalism. Everyone, regardless of their appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity when they walk through those doors. Kevin, still visibly shaken, mumbled, I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke. Harold turned his gaze to him, his expression unwavering. What's a joke to you can cut deeply for someone else. I hope you'll think about that moving forward. He let the words hang in the air before continuing. Now, I'm not here to clean house. I believe people can learn and grow. But let me be clear, if this behavior continues, there will be consequences. The tension in the room was palpable. But Harold wasn't angry. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had spent decades guiding young minds. Someone who understood that change came through teaching, not tearing down. After a pause, he added, tomorrow, we'll have a proper meeting to discuss my expectations and the vision for this dealership moving forward. Until then, I'd like you all to think about the kind of environment we want to create here, not just for our customers, but for each other. With that, Harold left the room, leaving behind more than just instructions. He left them with a mirror to reflect on their actions. As Harold walked out of the meeting, the air felt heavy with the tension he left behind. Back in the manager's office, Brian sat in stunned silence, while Kevin slumped in his chair, avoiding the glances of his colleagues. The sales team wasn't just embarrassed. They were shaken. None of them had seen this coming. And it was a humbling realization. That evening, Harold returned home to his quiet neighborhood. He settled into his favorite armchair, sipping a cup of tea. He wasn't one to revel in victory, but this moment carried a special kind of satisfaction. It wasn't about the money or the title. He had lived comfortably before this, and he would continue to do so. It was about the principle, standing tall in the face of condescension, and showing others that dignity could never be bought or sold. The next morning, Harold arrived early at the dealership. He greeted the receptionist with a warm smile and a cheerful good morning. Her hesitant smile betrayed her nervousness, but Harold's kindness was disarming. He wanted to make it clear that, while he demanded respect, he wouldn't rule with fear. At 9 o'clock sharp, the entire staff gathered in the conference room. For the promised meeting this time, Harold stood at the head of the table, a position that now felt rightfully his. The tension from the previous day lingered, but it was softened by curiosity. What kind of leader would he be? First, Harold began, looking around the room. I want to thank you all for being here. I know yesterday was a surprise, and I'm sure you have questions about what's next. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Let me be clear, I'm not here to disrupt your lives. I know many of you have families to support and careers you've worked hard to build. My goal is to create an environment where everyone, staff and customers alike, feels valued. Kevin, still visibly uneasy, shifted in his seat. Harold caught his glance and offered him a slight nod, as if to say, you're included in this now. Harold continued, let's talk about where we're going. This dealership is more than just a business. It's a representation of this community. People come here not just to buy cars, but to experience good service, trust, and respect. That's what we'll prioritize moving forward. He outlined his plans for training, programs on customer service, diversity, and workplace culture. The dealership would also introduce community outreach programs offering free car maintenance, workshops for underprivileged families, and sponsoring local events. Harold's vision wasn't just about profit, it was about making the business A pillar of the community, the staff listened intently, their initial skepticism melting away, as Harold's sincerity shone through by the end of the meeting. The room felt lighter. There were still nerves, of course, but there was also hope. Harold's approach wasn't about punishment. It was about growth, both as individuals and as a team. As Harold left the room, there was a shift in the air. Not just respect, but the beginning of something new, something better. Over the next few weeks, the dealership began to change. The new standards Harold implemented weren't just rules. They were a shift in culture. It wasn't easy at first. Some of the staff struggled to adjust, and a few left unable to adapt to the new expectations. But for those who stayed, Harold became a source of quiet inspiration. Kevin, in particular, found himself reflecting deeply on the events that had unfolded, the shame of his behavior gnawed at him. But Harold never singled him out or berated him in front of others. Instead, Harold treated Kevin the same as everyone else. With firm but fair guidance, one afternoon Kevin approached Harold in his office. He hesitated at the door before knocking, his nerves visible in his posture. Harold looked up from his desk and smiled. "Come in, Kevin." Kevin stepped inside, wringing his hands. "Mr. Jenkins, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I acted when you first came in. It was wrong, and I've been thinking a lot about it." Harold leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Apologies are a good start, Kevin, but real change comes from what you do moving forward. You've got potential, you just need to use it wisely." Kevin nodded, gratitude softening his features. "Thank you, I'll do better." And he did over time. Kevin became one of the most respected members of the team, known for his genuine care and professionalism. With customers, it was a transformation that reflected Harold's belief in second chances. The dealership's reputation began to soar, not just for its cars, but for its exceptional service. Customers who once felt intimidated by the sleek, high-end environment now felt welcomed. Harold made sure of it, often greeting customers himself and setting the tone for the entire team. The community noticed, and sales climbed steadily. But Harold's proudest moment came one Saturday morning, when a young man walked in, wearing scuffed sneakers and a worn hoodie. He hesitated near the entrance, his eyes scanning the rows of gleaming vehicles. Before anyone could judge or make assumptions, Kevin walked over with a warm smile. "Welcome," Kevin said. "How can I help you today?" The young man visibly relaxed, his initial hesitation melting away. Harold watched the interaction from a distance, a quiet smile on his face. It was a small moment, but it encapsulated everything he had worked for. As the dealership thrived, Harold became a respected figure in the community. He was no longer just a retired teacher, he was a leader, a mentor, and a reminder of the power of perseverance and integrity. But for Harold, it wasn't about being remembered. It was about what he had built, a legacy of respect and kindness that would outlast him. Harold Jenkins never sought recognition or applause. What he did was lead by example, showing that humility and strength could coexist. His journey from being mocked in a showroom to owning the very dealership was more than just a personal triumph. It was a lesson in perseverance, the importance of not judging others, and the power of standing tall in the face of disrespect. For Harold, the dealership wasn't just a business. It became a symbol of transformation. He showed that no matter how others see you, your worth is defined by your actions and character. The laughter he had faced was now replaced by admiration, not because he sought revenge, but because he turned the moment into a teaching opportunity. The staff learned that assumptions based on appearances could be deeply misleading and harmful. Customers learned they could find a place where dignity and respect was central to every interaction, and Harold, he proved that it's never too late to make a difference. So what's the lesson here? It's simple: treat everyone you meet with respect. No matter who they are or where they come from, you never know the battles they've fought or the triumphs they've achieved. And more importantly, never let someone else's judgment dictate your worth. As Harold often said to his staff in the months that followed, a person's value isn't written on their clothes or their wallet, it's written in how they carry themselves. and how they treat others if this story resonated with you. Remember to take its lesson to heart. And if you want to hear more stories like Harold's, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe together. We can remind the world of the values that truly matter. Please leave your comments and share your experiences. Thank you for being part of Gill Master Stories community. See you soon.